Sherlick Holmes, The Hound of Whiskerville, by Josh Lemke. What a wonderful day with not even a care. Birdie laid on the couch, Watson on the chair. Watson was close to sleeping, Birdie even closer, when suddenly Mrs. Hudson burst in like a bulldozer. "Birdie, Birdie, what are we to do? A crime was committed with nary a clue." Mrs. Hudson spoke faster than you could imagine. Birdie told her, "Slow down and tell me what happened." "I don't know who could have done it," Mrs. Hudson sobbed. "It's hard to talk about, but I think I've been robbed." Birdie said, "Whatever happened, I'll try to assist. Watson and I have been training for this." Birdie puts on her peacoat, presses her paws to the pavement, and makes sure to cancel all her prior engagements. She digs in the dirt to uncover each mystery. She puts her nose to the ground to discover its history. She brings along with her a magnifying glass and wears a fancy hat to show she has class. Observe and deduce, through information she combs, it's time for Birdie to become Sherlick B. Holmes. Mrs. Hudson talked them through it step by step. "It happened just after my first morning nap. I came over here and my food was all gone. I know I didn't finish it. I'd been napping since dawn."
"I see some furs over here, right next to your dish. Gray ones, brown ones, some long and some shortish."
She turned to Watson, and Watson expressed, "There's not much to go on, not enough for a guess." Mrs. Hudson soon added, "There's much more that happened." She pointed out her cat tree. They saw it was flattened. Once majestic and tall, where she often was nestled, now the highest peak was entirely leveled. Sherlick went closer to examine the mess, and found near its base some signs of distress.
"The bottom of this tower has been torn to scraps. This amount of damage led to its collapse. What could have made someone do this to you? Must have been powerful to cut all the way through."
She turned to Watson, and Watson whispered, "This mystery still has me rather bewildered." Mrs. Hudson continued, "It's worse than I feared. It's more than my dinner that has disappeared. My peanut butter is nowhere to be found. I always have some just lying around." So Sherlick sifted through the kitty's clutter, unable to find her prized peanut butter. She turned to Watson, and Watson uttered, "All of my theories so far have sputtered." "Oh no!" Mrs. Hudson screamed from her basket. She sounded like she had just blown a gasket. Her water was empty. Someone must have drank it, but way worse than that, there was a hole in her blanket. It was cut into a small perfect square. "Why would someone do this? Who would even dare?" Sherlick turned to Watson, and Watson said, "I hope we solve this before going to bed." The three of them looked around in defeat at the chaos surrounding them on Barker Street, when suddenly there came from below, climbing the wall, a scary, fierce shadow.
"What was that?"
Sherlick yelped, forgetting to be brave. Her stomach was in knots. It rolled like a wave. Just as soon as it came, the shadow then went, without a trace, without a scent.
"That thing was huge, must have been 200 pounds. It was a hideous creature, a monster, a hound."
She turned to Watson, and Watson shouted, "Don't worry, Sherlick Holmes. I've solved it. Don't you see, my dear Sherlick, what is happening here? I should have seen it much sooner. It couldn't be clearer."
"Of course," Sherlick said. "I too solved this query. But to be on the safe side, how about you tell me your theory?"
"You were on the right track from the very beginning. Some hairs we found were hers, but others too were clinging. The food was missing too, but it hadn't been whole. Mrs. Hudson had eaten most of the bowl. We assumed the tower fell from recent foul play, but the damage really started long before today. While the peanut butter missing didn't help me at all, the piece of fleece they took was notably small. But of all the clues we've looked at today, the shadow we saw is what gave it away. I hadn't realized before the light from the floor shining. It wasn't a huge creature. It was actually quite tiny." Watson led them to the corner near a crack in the wall. They followed her and found a hole round and small. Inside it a flickering light they could see. Above the hole was written 221C. Soon from this hole that must have been its small house came out a very scared brown and grey mouse. "Is there something you need?" The timid mouse quivered. He must have been cold. He shook and he shivered.
"This explains everything," Sherlick said in relief. "We thought you were bigger, a dangerous thief."
The mouse replied, "I never meant to hurt any of you. I only did what I felt I had to do." He continued, "I had to provide for my family. I made bedding out of pieces I chewed off the cat tree. Then I took a small piece of blanket and some food. I'm so sorry for the trouble. I didn't mean to intrude." Mrs. Hudson, Watson, and Sherlick Holmes huddled so close together they almost bumped domes. Mrs. Hudson said, "He just did what he thought was best. After all that he took, I am still so blessed. Though he doesn't take what he needs, I'll give it away. I'll give him my blanket and some food every day." The mouse in his joy shared his newfound prosperity. They all parted ways and left the mouse to his charity. After ending their day on such a high note, they settled down for bed and hung up their coats. Another mystery solved, lessons not soon forgotten, for Sherlick, Birdie Holmes, and Joan Cat Watson.